The notification sound from Marcus Chen's phone pierced through the quiet of his cramped studio apartment at 11:47 p.m. He glanced at the screen, expecting another job rejection or spam message, but instead found a text from his younger sister Elena that made his stomach drop. "Mom told me about your latest breakthrough with those computer viruses or whatever. Marcus, you're 28 and living like a college student. When are you going to get a real job instead of chasing these delusional fantasies about being some cyber genius? It's embarrassing for our family." Marcus stared at the message, his fingers hovering over the keyboard as another notification appeared, this one from his mother. "Your sister is right, mijo. Dr. Rodriguez's son just bought his parents a house with his engineering salary. What have your computer games gotten you? Please, just apply to the positions Elena found for you at her accounting firm." The third message came from Elena again. "I've already told my colleagues you're looking for entry-level work. The receptionist position pays $32,000. It's time to be realistic about your capabilities." Marcus set his phone down and looked around his sparse apartment. Empty energy drink cans lined his desk. 3 monitors glowed with lines of code he'd been debugging for the past 18 hours, and a stack of unpaid bills sat beside his laptop. To anyone looking in, Elena's assessment might seem harsh but fair. What they couldn't see was the revolutionary cybersecurity framework he'd been developing in secret for the past 3 years. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Marcus had always been the family disappointment, or at least that's how it felt growing up in the shadow of his sister Elena. While she excelled in traditional academics, became valedictorian, earned her CPA certification, and landed a prestigious job at Morrison Associates accounting firm, Marcus struggled through college, barely graduating with a computer science degree from a state school that his family considered adequate at best. The Chen family had immigrated from Taiwan when Marcus was 5 and Elena was 3. Their parents, both engineers who'd had to start over in America, placed enormous pressure on their children to achieve the American dream through conventional success. Elena delivered exactly what they wanted: stability, prestige, and a clear upward trajectory. Marcus, on the other hand, seemed to drift from one computer hobby to another, never holding a traditional job for more than 6 months. What his family didn't understand, or chose not to see, was that Marcus wasn't drifting. He was diving deeper into cybersecurity research than most people with advanced degrees ever would. After dropping out of a master's program that felt too theoretical, he'd started working on what he privately called Project Blackout, a comprehensive framework for detecting and neutralizing advanced persistent threats in government networks. The inspiration had come during his brief stint as a junior analyst at a small cybersecurity firm. He'd watched as supposedly sophisticated systems crumbled under attacks that his supervisors dismissed as theoretical or impossible. When Marcus proposed solutions, he was told he was overthinking and should focus on basic compliance work. After being laid off during budget cuts, he decided to develop his ideas independently, living off freelance web development work and his rapidly dwindling savings. For 3 years, Marcus had been operating in complete isolation. He'd rented server space under pseudonyms, created elaborate testing environments, and spent countless nights reverse engineering malware samples he'd acquired through gray market security forums. His methodology was unconventional, his resources were limited, but his results were extraordinary. He'd successfully identified and created countermeasures for attack vectors that major security firms were just beginning to theorize about. Empty energy drink cans lined his desk. 3 monitors glowed with lines of code he'd been debugging for the past 18 hours, and a stack of unpaid bills sat beside his laptop. To anyone looking in, Elena's assessment might seem harsh but fair. What they couldn't see was the revolutionary cybersecurity framework he'd been developing in secret for the past 3 years. To recognize, the problem was proving it. Marcus had written academic papers that were rejected by conferences for lacking institutional affiliation.
He'd reached out to established cybersecurity companies, only to be dismissed by HR departments that saw his resume gap and unconventional background as red flags. He'd even tried to get the attention of government agencies, but without proper channels or security clearances, his attempts fell into bureaucratic black holes. Meanwhile, Elena's career flourished. She'd been promoted twice in 3 years, earned a master's degree in business administration that the company paid for, and was being fast-tracked for partnership. At family gatherings, their parents would beam with pride as Elena discussed her latest clients and achievements, then turned to Marcus with barely concealed disappointment as he tried to explain his work in terms they could understand. The breaking point had come 6 months earlier, during their cousin's wedding reception. Elena, emboldened by champagne and surrounded by relatives, had delivered what she probably thought was loving tough love. "Marcus needs to face reality," she'd announced to the table. "These computer fantasies aren't going anywhere. He's not some Silicon Valley genius. He's just afraid of real responsibility." Their uncle had nodded sagely. "My son started in the mailroom at his law firm. Sometimes you have to begin at the bottom and work your way up through legitimate channels." "Exactly," Elena had continued. "Marcus thinks he's too good for normal work, but look where it's gotten him. Still living like he's in college, no savings, no stability. It's time for an intervention." Marcus had left the reception early, but Elena's words echoed in his mind for weeks afterward. Was she right? Was he delusional about his abilities? The doubt crept in during the long nights when his code wouldn't compile, when another job application was rejected, when he counted coins to buy groceries. But then he'd remember the elegance of his framework, the way his detection algorithms caught threats that commercial systems missed entirely. He'd remember the late-night eureka moments when pieces of the cybersecurity puzzle clicked into place in ways that felt almost prophetic. He knew, with a kind of certainty that's impossible to explain to skeptics, that he was onto something revolutionary. The irony was that Elena and their parents weren't entirely wrong about his situation. Marcus was struggling financially, professionally isolated, and increasingly disconnected from conventional career paths. What they couldn't see was that he was also on the verge of a breakthrough that would reshape how the government thought about cybersecurity. His framework, which he'd codenamed Sentinel, wasn't just another antivirus program or firewall configuration. It was a comprehensive approach to network defense that combined artificial intelligence, behavioral analysis, and predictive modeling in ways that hadn't been attempted before. Sentinel could not only detect known threats, but anticipate attack patterns, automatically adapt to new malware signatures, and coordinate responses across multiple network endpoints simultaneously. Marcus had tested Sentinel against every piece of malware he could obtain, every attack simulation he could devise. The system's success rate was unprecedented, not perfect, but significantly better than anything currently deployed by major organizations. More importantly, Sentinel was designed specifically for the unique challenges of government networks, legacy systems, security clearance restrictions, and the need for operations that couldn't be outsourced to private contractors. The challenge was getting anyone to take him seriously enough to see what he'd built. Marcus had no security clearance, no institutional backing, no network of contacts in the defense industry. His entire professional reputation existed in online forums where he posted under pseudonyms, sharing fragments of his research without revealing the full scope of his work. 3 months before Elena's latest text message, Marcus had made a decision.
Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story.
That felt either brilliant or completely insane. Instead of continuing to wait for someone to discover his work through conventional channels, he was going to force the issue. If Sentinel was as revolutionary as he believed, then demonstrating its capabilities in a controlled, ethical way would be worth the risk. Marcus had spent weeks identifying the perfect target, a Department of Defense contractor's public-facing server that handled unclassified but sensitive information. Not classified enough to constitute a federal crime, but important enough that a security breach would definitely get attention. His plan was to use Sentinel to detect vulnerabilities in their system, then alert them to the security gaps along with documentation of his framework's capabilities. It was a calculated gamble that could either launch his career or land him in federal prison. Marcus had researched the legal implications extensively, consulted with online privacy advocates, and structured his approach to stay within ethical hacking boundaries. But he also knew that good intentions wouldn't necessarily protect him if his actions were misinterpreted. The night Elena sent her dismissive text messages, Marcus was putting the finishing touches on his demonstration. Sentinel had identified 17 distinct vulnerabilities in the contractor's network, ranging from outdated software patches to sophisticated social engineering vectors that most security audits would miss. More impressively, the system had mapped out how these vulnerabilities could be chained together to create attack pathways that would give hostile actors unprecedented access to sensitive information. Marcus had documented everything meticulously: the detection methodology, the threat assessment algorithms, and most importantly, the automated remediation protocols that Sentinel could deploy to close the security gaps. His report read like a masterclass in cybersecurity, combining technical precision with strategic insight in ways that demonstrated not just what Sentinel could do, but why it represented a fundamental evolution in network defense. As he prepared to send his findings to the contractor's security team, along with a comprehensive brief on Sentinel's capabilities, Marcus felt a mixture of excitement and terror. This was either his shot at vindication or professional suicide. Elena's text messages had crystallized something he'd been avoiding. Time was running out for half measures and conventional approaches. The next morning, Marcus sent his report through encrypted channels to the contractor's chief information security officer, along with a cover letter that struck what he hoped was the right balance between confidence and humility. He explained his background, outlined Sentinel's unique capabilities, and requested a meeting to discuss how his framework might benefit government cybersecurity initiatives. Then he waited. Days turned into weeks with no response. Marcus began to wonder if his report had been dismissed as another crank communication from someone with more ambition than credentials. Elena's criticisms seemed more valid with each passing day of silence. Meanwhile, the family pressure intensified. Their mother called twice a week with updates on entry-level positions Elena had found for him. Their father sent articles about the importance of steady employment and building conventional career foundations. Elena herself launched a campaign of what she called reality therapy, sending Marcus listings for studio apartments near her office and information about professional development courses for career changers. The message was clear. His family had given up on his cybersecurity dreams and was actively working to redirect him toward what they considered realistic goals. Elena had even gone so far as to schedule an informational interview for him with her firm's human resources director, presenting it as a done deal rather than an option. Marcus found himself caught between mounting family pressure and his unwavering belief in Sentinel's potential. Every rational analysis suggested that Elena was right. He was
nearly 30, financially struggling, and pursuing a path that had yielded no concrete results despite years of effort. But every technical instinct told him that Sentinel represented something genuinely breakthrough, something that could revolutionize how critical infrastructure was protected. The contradiction was exhausting. Marcus began experiencing insomnia, anxiety attacks, and a kind of cognitive dissonance that made it difficult to focus on either his research or the job search his family expected him to pursue. He started second-guessing technical decisions he'd felt confident about for months, wondering if his isolation had distorted his judgment about Sentinel's capabilities. 6 weeks after sending his report to the defense contractor, Marcus was seriously considering Elena's offer to arrange interviews with accounting firms. Maybe she was right. Maybe it was time to acknowledge that unconventional approaches to cybersecurity careers were luxuries he couldn't afford. Maybe Sentinel was an impressive technical exercise that would never translate into real-world applications. That's when everything changed. Marcus was debugging a particularly stubborn piece of Sentinel code on a Tuesday afternoon when his phone rang with a number he didn't recognize. The area code was 703, Northern Virginia, which in cybersecurity circles often meant government work. He almost didn't answer, assuming it was another telemarketer, but something made him pick up. Marcus Chen? The voice was crisp, professional, with the kind of authority that suggested the caller was used to being taken seriously.
Yes, this is Marcus. Mr. Chen, this is Colonel Sarah Mitchell from the Department of Defense Cyber Command. I'm calling regarding the security assessment you provided to North Point Defense Solutions. Do you have a few minutes to talk? Marcus nearly dropped the phone. North Point Defense Solutions was the contractor he'd analyzed. They hadn't ignored his report. They'd forwarded it up the chain of command to people who understood exactly what they were looking at. Yes, absolutely. I have time. Excellent. Mr. Chen, your analysis of North Point's network vulnerabilities was comprehensive. The Sentinel framework you described represents some of the most innovative thinking we've seen in network defense architecture. We'd like to arrange a meeting to discuss your work in more detail. The conversation that followed was surreal. Colonel Mitchell spoke Marcus's language, asking technical questions that demonstrated a deep understanding of both his methodology and its implications. She mentioned specific aspects of Sentinel that Marcus had buried deep in appendices, suggesting that multiple experts had analyzed his work carefully. Mr. Chen, I want to be clear about something, Colonel Mitchell said as the call wound down. What you've developed isn't just innovative, it's potentially game-changing for national security. We'd like to arrange a meeting at the Pentagon to discuss how Sentinel might be integrated into our cybersecurity infrastructure. Marcus agreed to the meeting, scheduled for the following week, in a daze. After ending the call, he sat in his cramped apartment, surrounded by the evidence of what his family considered failure, and tried to process what had just happened. The Pentagon wanted to meet with him. The Pentagon had called him. His first instinct was to call Elena to share the vindication he dreamed about for years. But something held him back. This was too important, too delicate to risk having his family's skepticism contaminate the opportunity. Instead, Marcus spent the evening researching Colonel Mitchell, Cyber Command organizational structure, and what he could expect from a Pentagon meeting. The research confirmed what the phone call had suggested. This wasn't a courtesy meeting or a polite brush-off. Cyber Command didn't waste time on amateur hour. If they wanted to discuss Sentinel, it meant that serious people had concluded his work represented serious value. Marcus spent the week preparing for the meeting with
intensity that bordered on obsession. He refined his Sentinel documentation, created presentation materials that would work in a high-security environment, and researched every aspect of government cybersecurity policy that might be relevant to his framework. He also kept the upcoming meeting completely secret from his family. Elena continued sending job listings and motivational texts about the importance of practical career choices. Their parents called with updates on various entry-level positions they'd heard about through their network of immigrant professional friends. Marcus responded to all of these communications with non-committal acknowledgments, neither confirming nor denying that he was pursuing the opportunities they suggested. The day before his Pentagon meeting, Elena sent a text that felt like emotional manipulation disguised as sisterly concern. Mom is worried you're having some kind of breakdown. She says you sound different on the phone, distracted. Please don't let pride prevent you from accepting help. The receptionist position at our firm is still available, and honestly, it might be a good way for you to rebuild your confidence while you figure out what you really want to do with your life. Marcus read the message twice, then set his phone aside without responding. In less than 24 hours, he would be presenting Sentinel to some of the most sophisticated cybersecurity professionals in the world. Elena's assessment of his life was about to become spectacularly obsolete. The Pentagon meeting exceeded Marcus's most optimistic expectations. Colonel Mitchell introduced him to a team of experts who had clearly spent considerable time studying his work. They asked questions that pushed Sentinel's capabilities to their limits, explored edge cases he hadn't considered, and discussed integration challenges with the kind of specificity that suggested genuine implementation was under consideration. Mr. Chen, Colonel Mitchell said as the formal presentation concluded,
We'd like to propose a consulting arrangement. Sentinel addresses several critical gaps in our current cybersecurity infrastructure. We're prepared to offer you a contract to further develop the framework specifically for government applications. The terms she outlined were extraordinary: a six-figure consulting fee, access to classified testing environments, collaboration with top-tier cybersecurity researchers, and the potential for Sentinel to become a cornerstone of national defense infrastructure. Marcus accepted on the spot. The contract process took 3 weeks, during which Marcus was required to undergo extensive background checks and security clearance procedures. He used the time to incorporate feedback from the Pentagon meeting into Sentinel's architecture and to begin adapting the framework for the specific requirements of government networks. Throughout this period, Elena continued her campaign to redirect his career toward conventional paths. She scheduled the informational interview with her firm's HR director without asking Marcus's permission, then called to inform him that he was expected at their office the following Monday at 2 p.m. "I've told them that you're brilliant but misguided. They're willing to overlook your unconventional background if you demonstrate genuine commitment to building a stable career. This is your chance, Marcus. Please don't waste it." Marcus found himself in the strange position of having to decline a job interview he'd never requested for a position he didn't want, while being unable to explain why. His security clearance application prohibited him from discussing his Pentagon contract, even with family members. "Elena, I appreciate what you're trying to do, but I can't make that interview. I have other commitments." "What commitments? Marcus, you're unemployed. What could possibly be more important than a real job opportunity?" Marcus chose his words carefully. "I'm working on something. I can't give you details right now, but I need you to trust that I know what I'm doing." Elena's response was immediate.
Devastating. "Marcus, this is exactly what I'm talking about. These mysterious projects and commitments that never lead anywhere. You're living in a fantasy world, and it's heartbreaking to watch. Mom and Dad are embarrassed to talk about you with their friends. Do you understand that? Your delusional behavior is affecting our entire family." The conversation ended with Elena hanging up after delivering an ultimatum: attend the interview she'd arranged, or stop expecting family support for what she called his self-indulgent fantasies. Marcus spent that evening walking around his neighborhood, processing the surreal contrast between his family's perception of his life and the reality of his Pentagon contract. In 3 days, he would begin work on what could become one of the most significant cybersecurity initiatives in government history. Elena thought he was unemployed and delusional. The first day of his Pentagon consulting work confirmed that Sentinel was everything Marcus had believed it to be. The initial tests exceeded even optimistic projections, successfully detecting and neutralizing threats that had previously gone unnoticed in government networks. Colonel Mitchell's team was effusive in their praise, and preliminary discussions began about expanding the framework to additional defense applications. Marcus worked 16-hour days, driven by the intoxicating combination of technical challenge and national importance. Sentinel was evolving beyond his original vision, incorporating insights from classified threat intelligence and operational requirements he'd never had access to as an independent researcher. 2 weeks into the contract, Colonel Mitchell asked Marcus to join a meeting with senior leadership about integrating Sentinel into broader cybersecurity policy. The meeting included generals, deputy directors from various agencies, and technical experts whose names Marcus recognized from cybersecurity literature. "Mr. Chen's framework represents a paradigm shift in how we approach network defense," Colonel Mitchell explained to the assembled leadership. "Sentinel's predictive capabilities and automated response protocols could revolutionize our cybersecurity posture across multiple agencies." The discussion that followed was highly technical, but the conclusions were clear. Sentinel was being fast-tracked for implementation across critical government networks. Marcus would be leading a team of researchers to adapt the framework for different agencies, with a budget and timeline that suggested the project was considered a national priority. As the meeting concluded, one of the generals approached Marcus directly. "Son,
I want you to understand something. What you've developed here isn't just impressive. It's the kind of breakthrough that protects American lives. The threats we're facing in cyberspace are evolving faster than our traditional responses can handle. Sentinel gives us the ability to stay ahead of those threats. This is important work. Marcus left the Pentagon that day feeling a sense of professional validation he'd never experienced before. His family thought he was delusional, but the highest levels of government considered his work critical to national security. The contradiction was almost absurdly complete. That evening, as Marcus was updating his Sentinel documentation in his apartment, Elena called with what she clearly expected to be devastating news. Marcus, I have to tell you something, and I want you to listen carefully. I spoke with Dr. Rodriguez today. You remember Mom's friend whose son is the successful engineer? He says there are signs that you might be experiencing some kind of mental health crisis. The isolation, the grandiose claims about your computer work, the refusal to engage with realistic career options. He thinks you might need professional help. Elena's voice carried the tone of someone delivering a difficult but necessary intervention. We've all been enabling your delusions by pretending your projects might lead somewhere. It's time for tough love. Either you get help and start pursuing
Employment, or we can't keep supporting these fantasies. Marcus listened to his sister's diagnosis of his mental state while looking at Pentagon contract documents that classified him as a critical national security asset. The irony was so profound it felt almost cosmic. Elena, I understand you're concerned, but I'm actually doing quite well professionally right now. Marcus, please, you're unemployed. You live in a studio apartment. You haven't had a real job in months. These computer projects aren't a career, they're escapism. What if I told you that my computer work has attracted some significant attention lately? Elena sighed with the patience of someone addressing a child. More fantasy networking and made-up opportunities? Marcus, this is exactly what Dr. Rodriguez was talking about. The grandiose delusions, the inability to accept reality. You need help. Marcus made a decision that would change everything. Elena, what would you say if I told you the Pentagon called me about my work? The silence on the other end of the line stretched for nearly 30 seconds. When Elena finally responded, her voice carried a mixture of disbelief and anger. Marcus, that's exactly the kind of delusional thinking we're all worried about. The Pentagon? Seriously? Do you hear how that sounds? It sounds unbelievable, Marcus agreed, but it's true. Prove it. Marcus had been waiting months for someone to challenge him to prove what he'd accomplished. The security restrictions around his Pentagon work were strict, but certain basic facts weren't classified. Elena, I'm going to give you a phone number. It's the main switchboard for the Department of Defense Cyber Command. Ask to speak with Colonel Sarah Mitchell's office. Tell them you're calling to verify the employment status of Marcus Chen. Don't mention anything else. Just ask if Marcus Chen is currently under contract with their office. Elena was quiet for a long moment. You're serious. Completely serious. And if I make this call and they have no idea who you are, then you'll have proof that I need the kind of help you and Dr. Rodriguez think I need. Fine. But Marcus, if this is another fantasy, if you're making up Pentagon contracts, then we're going to insist you get psychiatric evaluation. This can't continue. Elena made the call the next morning. Marcus was in a Pentagon conference room, presenting Sentinel updates to a joint task force of cybersecurity experts from multiple agencies, when his phone buzzed with a text from his sister. The message contained just 4 words. "Holy shit, you're right!" followed immediately by, "Call me now." Marcus stepped out of the meeting and returned Elena's call from a secure corridor in the Pentagon. Marcus? Elena's voice was completely different, shocked, embarrassed, and something that might have been awe. I called that number. They transferred me to Colonel Mitchell's office. Her assistant confirmed that you're under contract as a senior cybersecurity consultant. She said you're working on a high-priority national defense initiative. I tried to tell you. The Pentagon, Marcus.
The actual Pentagon thinks your computer work is important enough to hire you as a consultant. The actual Pentagon thinks my computer work might help protect the country. Elena was quiet for nearly a minute. When she spoke again, her voice was small and uncertain. How long? How long what? How long have you been working with them? The contract started 3 weeks ago, but they've been evaluating my work for about 2 months. 2 months. Elena's voice was hollow. Marcus, for the past 2 months, I've been telling everyone you were unemployed and delusional. I scheduled job interviews for you. I told Mom and Dad you needed psychiatric intervention. I called you delusional just yesterday. I know. You know? Why didn't you tell us? Why didn't you defend yourself? Marcus considered how to answer that question honestly. Elena, for 3 years, every time I tried to explain what I was working on, you told me I was living in a fantasy. Mom and Dad made it clear they thought my work was just fantasy. Research was a waste of time. When the Pentagon opportunity came up, I decided to let the results speak for themselves rather than arguing about it. But we could have supported you. We could have understood. Could you have, Elena? When I told you the Pentagon was interested in my work, your immediate response was to say I was delusional and needed psychiatric help. The truth of that hit Elena with obvious force. Oh God, Marcus, I'm so sorry. I didn't understand. We all thought, you thought I was a failure who needed to be rescued from himself. Yes. Elena's admission was barely audible. We thought you were wasting your life on impossible dreams. Marcus found himself in the unexpected position of needing to comfort his sister, who was clearly devastated by the realization of how wrong she'd been. Elena, you weren't entirely wrong about my situation. I was struggling financially. I was socially isolated. From the outside, it probably did look like I was avoiding adult responsibilities. But you were working on something real, something important. I was working on something I believed was important. The fact that it turned out to be important was partly luck. Luck? Elena's voice sharpened. Marcus, they don't give Pentagon contracts based on luck. You must have developed something extraordinary. Marcus looked around the Pentagon corridor at the security badges and classified area markers that had become routine parts of his daily environment. Yeah, I think maybe I did. That evening, Elena called a family conference call that included Marcus, their parents, and herself. She began by announcing that she had something important to share about Marcus's career situation. I need to tell you all something, and I need to apologize to Marcus publicly, Elena began, her voice carrying the formal tone she used for serious business presentations. For the past several months, I've been telling everyone that Marcus was unemployed and pursuing unrealistic career fantasies. I was wrong. Completely. Embarrassingly wrong. Their mother's voice came through the phone connection with characteristic concern. Elena, what are you talking about? Mom, Dad, Marcus is working as a senior consultant for the Pentagon. Specifically, he's working with the Department of Defense Cyber Command on what they describe to me as a high-priority national defense initiative. The silence that followed was profound. Marcus could picture his parents processing this information, trying to reconcile their perception of his recent struggles with the implications of what Elena was telling them. Their father spoke first. Marcus, is this true? It's true, Dad. The Pentagon is paying you to work on cybersecurity? They're paying me to develop and implement a cybersecurity framework I created. It's designed to protect government networks from advanced cyber threats. Their mother's voice was tentative, almost fearful. Mijo, how long has this been happening? The official contract started about a month ago, but they'd been evaluating my work for several months before that. Elena interjected, her embarrassment evident. Mom, Dad, while Marcus was working on this Pentagon project, I was scheduling job interviews for him at accounting firms. I told him he was delusional and needed psychiatric help. I said his computer work was embarrassing to our family. The family call continued for over an hour, with Marcus explaining as much as security restrictions allowed about his work, and Elena repeatedly apologizing for her misjudgment. Their parents asked careful questions that revealed how little they'd understood about Marcus's actual capabilities and achievements. By the end of the conversation, the family dynamic had shifted completely. Instead of the disappointing son who needed intervention, Marcus had become the family member whose work was too classified to discuss in detail. Instead of the responsible daughter whose judgment could be trusted, Elena had become the sister who'd spectacularly misread a situation. The reversal was so complete that Marcus felt almost guilty
About it. Elena's assessment of his situation hadn't been entirely unreasonable based on the information available to her. His lifestyle had been precarious, his career path unconventional to the point of seeming non-existent. What she'd missed was the substance of his work and his genuine expertise in a field she didn't understand. Over the following months, as Sentinel's implementation expanded across multiple government agencies, Marcus's professional reputation within cybersecurity circles grew exponentially. Conference invitations arrived from organizations that had previously rejected his submissions. Headhunters called with offers from defense contractors and technology companies. Academic institutions reached out about research positions and guest lectureships. Elena, meanwhile, began what she called her professional education about cybersecurity, reading voraciously about the field she'd dismissed as Marcus's computer fantasy. She discovered that cybersecurity was one of the fastest growing and most critical areas of technology work, with practitioners commanding salaries that often exceeded traditional professional careers like accounting. "Marcus, I had no idea," she confided during one of their weekly phone calls. "I've been reading about advanced persistent threats and network defense strategies. This stuff is incredibly complex and incredibly important. It's what I've been trying to tell you for years. I know. I'm realizing how arrogant I was about dismissing something I didn't understand. I kept thinking that if it was really important, it would look like the careers I was familiar with." Marcus had forgiven Elena's skepticism, partly because her newfound respect for his work felt genuine, and partly because he understood how his unconventional path would have appeared to someone focused on traditional career markers. But the experience had taught him something important about the difference between appearing successful and actually being successful. 6 months after the Pentagon contract began, Marcus received a call that put his journey into perfect perspective. Colonel Mitchell was offering him a permanent position as Director of Advanced Threat Response, leading a team of cybersecurity researchers with a budget that would fund Sentinel's expansion to protect critical infrastructure across the entire federal government. "Mr. Chen, your framework has exceeded every expectation we had when we first reviewed your work. Sentinel is becoming the foundation for next-generation cybersecurity across multiple agencies. We'd like you to lead that expansion permanently." Marcus accepted the position, which came with a salary that was more than double what Elena earned in her accounting career, along with benefits, security clearances, and the kind of professional prestige that his family had always hoped one of their children would achieve. That evening, Marcus called Elena to share the news. Her response was immediate and wholehearted. "Marcus, I am so proud of you, and I am so sorry for not believing in you sooner." "Elena, you weren't wrong to worry about my situation. I was taking huge risks with an unconventional career path. It could have failed completely. But it didn't fail because you knew what you were doing. You had expertise I couldn't recognize because I didn't understand the field. I should have trusted your judgment about your own career." Marcus considered his sister's words as he looked around his Pentagon office, where Sentinel monitoring systems tracked threats across government networks in real time. Elena was right that he'd known what he was doing, but she was also right that his path had been risky. The difference between success and failure had often been measured in small margins of luck and timing. "Elena, I want you to understand something. The reason this worked out wasn't just because I was right about my technical abilities. It was also because I was willing to bet everything on those abilities when nobody else believed in them, including your own family. Especially my own family. But that taught me Something important about confidence and persistence
Sometimes believing in yourself means continuing to work toward goals that look impossible to other people. Elena was quiet for a moment. Marcus, can I ask you something? Sure. When I called you delusional about your career, when I said you needed psychiatric help, how did you not doubt yourself? How did you keep believing in your work when everyone around you thought it was fantasy? Marcus thought about Elena's question as he watched Sentinel's real-time threat detection systems process thousands of potential security events across government networks. How had he maintained confidence in his abilities when his own family thought he was delusional? I think it came down to evidence, he said finally. Every day when I worked on Sentinel, I could see that it was solving real problems in ways that existing systems couldn't. The technical results were undeniable, even if nobody else was seeing them. I had to trust that eventually the right people would recognize the value of what I'd built. But what if you'd been wrong? What if Sentinel hadn't worked as well as you thought? Then you would have been right about me being delusional, and I probably would have ended up taking that receptionist job at your firm. Elena laughed, but Marcus could hear the lingering guilt in her voice. Marcus, I hope you know that even when I thought you were making a mistake, it came from wanting you to be secure and stable. I was worried about you. I know, Elena. And honestly, having family members who cared enough to worry about my future, even when they misunderstood my work, was better than having nobody who cared at all. The conversation ended with Elena promising to visit Washington so Marcus could give her a tour of his Pentagon office, security restrictions permitting. As Marcus prepared for another day of expanding Sentinel's capabilities to protect national infrastructure, he reflected on how dramatically his relationship with his family had changed. Elena had gone from calling him delusional to describing him as a genius. Their parents had shifted from embarrassment about his career to pride in his government service. The transformation was gratifying, but it also highlighted how much their support had been conditional on external validation of his success. Marcus realized that the most important thing he learned wasn't about cybersecurity or career development. It was about the difference between believing in yourself and needing others to believe in you. For 3 years, he'd continued working on Sentinel despite his family's skepticism because he'd trusted his own assessment of its value. That self-confidence, more than his technical skills, had made the difference between giving up and achieving breakthrough success. The Pentagon opportunity had vindicated Marcus's belief in his work, but the real victory was that he'd maintained that belief even when the people closest to him thought it was delusional. In a world where external validation is often treated as the measure of worth, Marcus had learned to trust his own judgment about what was possible and important. As Sentinel continued to evolve and protect critical government systems, Marcus often thought about other people who might be working on breakthrough ideas in isolation, dismissed by families and peers who couldn't recognize the value of unconventional approaches. His story had become proof that sometimes the most important work happens in the spaces between traditional career paths, pursued by people willing to bet everything on their vision of what's possible. Elena's journey from skeptic to supporter had been dramatic, but the ripple effects of Marcus's Pentagon success extended far beyond his immediate family. Word of his breakthrough had begun circulating through the tight-knit cybersecurity community, where reputation and credibility were built over decades of incremental achievements. Marcus's rapid ascent from unknown independent researcher to Pentagon director challenged every assumption about how careers in government cybersecurity were supposed to develop. Dr. Amanda Foster, the cybersecurity professor who had rejected Marcus's early academic papers, received a call from a colleague at the National Security Agency asking about her familiarity with Marcus Chen's work. The irony wasn't lost on her, as she explained that she dismissed his submissions 3 years earlier because they lacked institutional backing and seemed too theoretical for practical application. Amanda, the Pentagon is implementing his Sentinel framework across multiple agencies, her NSA contact explained, His threat detection algorithms are identifying attack vectors that our best systems have been missing for months. We're trying to understand how someone working independently developed capabilities that surpass what our research teams have been building with classified resources. Dr. Foster spent that evening reviewing the papers she'd rejected, seeing them now through the lens of Marcus's proven success. The technical insights that had seemed overly ambitious in an academic context revealed themselves as prescient understanding of cybersecurity evolution. She realized that her rejection had been based not on the quality of Marcus's work, but on her inability to imagine that breakthrough research could emerge from outside established institutions. The recognition stung, but it also prompted Dr. Foster to examine her assumptions about innovation and credibility. How many other unconventional researchers had she dismissed because their work didn't fit traditional academic patterns? How many breakthrough ideas had been delayed or lost because gatekeepers like herself prioritized institutional affiliations over intellectual merit? Meanwhile, at Cybertron Systems, the commercial cybersecurity firm where Marcus had briefly worked as a junior analyst, senior management was conducting their own uncomfortable reckoning. The company's chief technology officer, David Park, had been the one to lay Marcus off during budget cuts, dismissing his proposals as overthinking that distracted from practical client work. Now, Cybertron's biggest government contractor client was asking why their security systems had failed to detect threats that the Pentagon's new Sentinel framework identified immediately. The client wanted to know if Cybertron had access to similar capabilities, and if not, when they could be developed. David Park found himself in the humiliating position of explaining that his company had once employed the creator of Sentinel, but had failed to recognize the value of his work. The client's response was swift and predictable. If Cybertron couldn't provide advanced threat detection capabilities, they would find vendors who could. The financial implications were staggering. Cybertron's government contracts represented nearly 40% of their revenue, and losing them would trigger layoffs, restructuring, and possible bankruptcy. All because David Park had been too narrow in his thinking to recognize revolutionary cybersecurity research when it was happening in his own office. David's attempts to contact Marcus about potential collaboration were met with polite but firm rejection. Marcus's Pentagon responsibilities required exclusive focus on government applications, and even if they didn't, he had no interest in working with people who had demonstrated such poor judgment about his capabilities. The lesson was becoming clear throughout the cybersecurity industry. Traditional metrics for evaluating talent and innovation were failing to identify the most important developments in the field. Marcus's success was forcing a broader conversation about how organizations could avoid missing the next breakthrough researcher working outside conventional channels. At Morrison Associates, Elena's accounting firm, the revelation about Marcus's Pentagon career had created its own awkward dynamics. Elena's colleagues, who had heard months of complaints about her brother's unrealistic career fantasies, were now processing the fact that he was earning significantly more than anyone at their firm while working on classified national security projects. Richard Morrison, the firm's managing partner, approached Elena with questions that revealed how little the traditional professional world understood about cybersecurity careers. Elena, I have to ask, is your brother's position really as significant as it sounds? I mean, computer work for the government? Elena found herself in the strange position of educating her boss about the importance of cybersecurity to national defense and economic stability. Richard, cybersecurity isn't just computer work any more than surgery is just medical work. Marcus is protecting critical infrastructure that keeps the country functioning. His framework is being implemented across agencies because cyber threats are one of the most serious challenges facing national security. The conversation highlighted a generational and cultural gap that Marcus's success was helping to bridge. Traditional professionals like Richard Morrison had built careers when technology was a support function rather than a strategic imperative. Marcus represented a new category of expertise that was becoming central to organizational survival, but was still poorly understood by established business leaders. Elena's own relationship with her accounting career had begun shifting as she learned more about Marcus's work.
The complexity and importance of cybersecurity made her own professional achievements feel incremental by comparison. She'd spent years optimizing tax strategies and compliance procedures, while Marcus was developing systems that could prevent catastrophic attacks on critical infrastructure. The comparison wasn't entirely fair. Both careers served important functions, but Elena couldn't escape the feeling that she'd been too quick to dismiss technological innovation as less valuable than traditional professional success. Her conversation with Richard Morrison had made her realize that many established professionals shared her previous blind spots about the strategic importance of cybersecurity expertise. Marcus, meanwhile, was discovering that success at the Pentagon came with its own complex dynamics. His rapid rise from consultant to director had created tension with career civil servants who had spent decades building their expertise through conventional channels. Some viewed him as an outsider who had bypassed the normal progression of security clearances, government experience, and institutional relationships. Colonel Mitchell had warned Marcus about these dynamics during his first week as director. Marcus, you need to understand that some people here will resent your unconventional background. They've spent 20 years working their way up through the system, and you've achieved a senior position in 6 months. The fact that your work justifies the advancement doesn't necessarily make it easier for them to accept. The advice proved prescient. Marcus found himself navigating subtle but persistent resistance from team members who questioned his decisions, not on technical grounds, but because they reflected approaches that hadn't been validated through traditional government processes. His proposals for rapid prototype development and agile implementation were met with concerns about proper procedures and established protocols. Dr. Jennifer Walsh, a senior researcher who had been passed over for the director position that went to Marcus, was particularly vocal about the need to maintain institutional standards in cybersecurity development. Her concerns seemed reasonable on the surface, but consistently slowed progress on initiatives that Marcus considered urgent. Marcus, I understand your enthusiasm for rapid deployment, Dr. Walsh would say during team meetings. But government cybersecurity requires extensive testing protocols that can't be abbreviated. We have procedures for a reason. Marcus found himself caught between his instinct for innovation and the need to work within government bureaucracy. Sentinel's success had given him credibility, but it hadn't eliminated the cultural barriers that separated traditional government operations from the kind of entrepreneurial thinking that had made his breakthrough possible. The tension came to a head during a joint meeting with representatives from multiple agencies who were implementing Sentinel across their networks. Dr. Walsh raised concerns about the framework's insufficient validation through standard government testing procedures, suggesting that broader deployment should be delayed until more extensive review could be completed. Marcus realized that Dr. Walsh's objections weren't really about testing procedures, they were about institutional control. She represented a mindset that valued process over results, credentialing over capability. Her resistance threatened to undermine Sentinel's implementation at the moment when cyber threats were escalating rapidly. Colonel Mitchell recognized the dynamic and intervened decisively. Dr. Walsh, I appreciate your attention to proper procedures, but Sentinel has already proven its effectiveness in live threat environments. Our testing shows that Marcus's framework is detecting and neutralizing attacks that our traditional systems missed entirely. The risk of delay outweighs the benefits of additional validation. The colonel's support was crucial, but Marcus understood that his long-term success would require building broader institutional acceptance for unconventional approaches to cybersecurity development. He couldn't rely indefinitely on high-level protection from bureaucratic resistance. Marcus began developing what he privately called institutional translation, the ability to present innovative ideas in language and frameworks that traditional government professionals could accept. Instead of emphasizing Sentinel's departure from established practices, he focused on how it enhanced and extended existing security protocols. The approach proved effective. Dr. Walsh and others gradually became more supportive as Marcus demonstrated that innovation could coexist with institutional stability. Sentinel's implementation proceeded smoothly across agencies, and Marcus's team began developing additional frameworks that built on the foundation of his original breakthrough. 6 months into his director role, Marcus received an invitation that crystallized how dramatically his professional status had changed. The annual Cybersecurity Innovation Summit, organized by the industry's most prestigious professional association, wanted him to deliver the keynote address on revolutionary approaches to national defense. 3 years earlier, the same organization had rejected his abstract for a panel presentation on advanced threat detection. Now they were offering him the platform reserved for the field's most distinguished leaders. The invitation came with a speaking fee that exceeded Elena's monthly salary at the accounting firm. Marcus accepted the speaking engagement partly for its professional value, but mostly as an opportunity to encourage other unconventional researchers who might be working in isolation. His keynote address would focus not just on Sentinel's technical capabilities, but on the importance of persistence and self-confidence in pursuing breakthrough ideas. The weeks leading up to the summit gave Marcus time to reflect on the journey from his cramped studio apartment to the Pentagon's advanced cybersecurity initiatives. The transformation had been remarkable, but it had also highlighted the arbitrary nature of professional recognition and family support. Elena called regularly now, asking about his work and sharing articles about cybersecurity developments she thought might interest him. Their parents had begun describing him to their friends as our son, the Pentagon cybersecurity expert, with pride that felt genuine but belated. The family's attitude toward his career had reversed completely, but Marcus understood that their support remained conditional on external validation of his success. The realization didn't diminish his appreciation for their newfound respect, but it did reinforce his understanding that self-confidence
couldn't depend on other people's approval. Elena's initial skepticism had been painful, but it had also forced him to develop the internal conviction necessary to pursue breakthrough work without external encouragement. Dr. Rodriguez, the family friend whose son was the successful engineer, approached Marcus's father at a community gathering with questions about cybersecurity career opportunities for his youngest daughter. The irony wasn't lost on Marcus when his father relayed the conversation. The same person who had suggested Marcus needed psychiatric intervention was now seeking career advice based on Marcus's success. Dr. Rodriguez wants to know if you could mentor his daughter, Marcus's father explained during one of their weekly phone calls. She's studying computer science, and he thinks cybersecurity might be a good field for her. Marcus agreed to meet with Dr. Rodriguez's daughter, partly out of respect for his father, but mostly because he remembered how isolated he'd felt as a young researcher without mentorship or guidance. If he could help someone else avoid some of the struggles he'd experienced, the effort would be worthwhile. The mentoring conversation revealed how much Marcus's perspective on career development had evolved. Dr. Rodriguez's daughter, Sarah, was brilliant and technically capable, but she was also focused on following conventional paths to cybersecurity careers, internships at established firms, graduate programs at prestigious universities, networking with industry professionals. Marcus found himself encouraging her to consider more unconventional approaches while also acknowledging the value of traditional credentialing. Sarah, the conventional path will probably work well for you. You have the academic background and technical skills that employers are looking for. But don't be afraid to pursue independent research projects that interest you, even if they don't fit into standard internship or coursework requirements. Sarah's questions helped Marcus articulate lessons he'd learned about balancing innovation with career pragmatism. How do you know when an unconventional approach is worth the risk versus when it's just impractical? She asked. I think it comes down to evidence and persistence, Marcus replied. If your technical results consistently exceed what traditional approaches achieve, and if you're willing to maintain that work even when other people don't immediately recognize its value, then unconventional approaches might be worth pursuing. But you also need backup plans and the ability to pivot if the evidence doesn't support your approach. The conversation reminded Marcus that his success with Sentinel hadn't been inevitable.
It had required a combination of technical insight, strategic thinking, and remarkable persistence in the face of skepticism. Other researchers with similar capabilities might have given up when faced with family pressure, institutional rejection, and financial uncertainty. Marcus's keynote address at the Cybersecurity Innovation Summit drew an audience of over 2,000 professionals, including many who had previously dismissed his work or career prospects. Standing at the podium, looking out at an audience that represented the industry's elite, Marcus felt the full weight of how dramatically his circumstances had changed. 3 years ago, I was working in isolation on ideas that most people in this room would have considered impractical or impossible, Marcus began his address. I submitted papers to conferences that were rejected, applied for positions that went to more traditionally qualified candidates, and listened to family members who thought my research was a waste of time. The audience was engaged from the opening, recognizing the universal challenges of innovation and career development. Marcus continued, "The cybersecurity threats we face today require approaches that didn't exist in textbooks or established practices. Sentinel succeeded not because it followed conventional wisdom, but because it questioned assumptions that everyone else accepted as truth."
Limitations. Marcus spent 45 minutes outlining Sentinel's development, implementation, and ongoing evolution, but he devoted equal time to discussing the personal and professional challenges of pursuing breakthrough research outside established institutions. His message was both technical and inspirational. The future of cybersecurity would be shaped by people willing to think beyond current constraints. The response was immediate and overwhelming. During the question and answer session, audience members shared their own experiences with institutional resistance to innovative ideas. Several people approached Marcus afterward to describe research projects they'd abandoned because of lack of support or recognition. Dr. Amanda Foster, the professor who had rejected Marcus's early papers, was among those who sought him out after the presentation. "Marcus, I owe you an apology. I rejected your submissions 3 years ago because they didn't fit our conference's typical academic format. I realize now that I was applying the wrong criteria to evaluate genuinely innovative work." Marcus appreciated the apology, but he was more interested in Dr. Foster's commitment to changing how academic institutions evaluated unconventional research. "Amanda, the important thing isn't what happened with my papers. The important thing is making sure other researchers don't face the same barriers when they're trying to share breakthrough ideas." The conversation led to Dr. Foster inviting Marcus to serve on a committee redesigning academic conference standards to better accommodate innovative research that didn't fit traditional formats. The opportunity represented a chance to influence how the next generation of cybersecurity researchers would be evaluated and supported. Marcus accepted the committee position, along with several other speaking engagements and advisory roles that emerged from his summit presentation. His calendar was filling with opportunities to shape cybersecurity education, research priorities, and industry standards. The transformation from isolated researcher to influential leader was accelerating beyond anything he could have imagined. Elena attended Marcus's keynote address, traveling to Washington specifically to watch her brother address the cybersecurity industry's most important annual gathering. Sitting in the audience, listening to Marcus receive standing ovations for ideas she'd once dismissed as delusional fantasies, Elena experienced a profound shift in her understanding of success and achievement. "Marcus, I had no idea," she told him after the presentation. "Not just about your technical work, but about what it means to pursue something that doesn't fit conventional categories. I've spent my entire career following predictable paths, and you've created something entirely new." Elena's reflection highlighted a broader transformation happening within their family and social circle. Marcus's unconventional success had challenged everyone's assumptions about career development, risk-taking, and the relationship between innovation and stability. His story was becoming a case study in the limitations of traditional professional wisdom. Their parents attended a community celebration in Marcus's honor, organized by the local Taiwanese American Professional Association. The same group that had once viewed Marcus as the disappointing son who couldn't follow conventional success patterns now celebrated him as a role model for entrepreneurial achievement and technical innovation.
Dr. Rodriguez, whose suggestion that Marcus needed psychiatric help had precipitated Elena's intervention 6 months earlier, introduced Marcus as the evening's keynote speaker. The irony was almost too perfect. The man who had questioned Marcus's mental health was now praising his visionary leadership in cybersecurity innovation.
Experiences with economic uncertainty and cultural barriers. My parents wanted me to follow paths that they understood would lead to security and respect. They couldn't have anticipated that cybersecurity would become one of the most important and well-compensated fields in technology. The evening concluded with Marcus's parents expressing pride in his achievements while also acknowledging their earlier misjudgments. "We didn't understand what you were working on," his mother admitted during her remarks. "We were afraid you were avoiding responsibility, but you were actually taking on the biggest responsibility of all, protecting our country's security." The family reconciliation was meaningful, but Marcus remained aware that their support was contingent on his continued success. If Sentinel had failed, if the Pentagon contract hadn't materialized, their criticism of his unconventional approach would have seemed entirely justified. The difference between visionary persistence and delusional stubbornness often came down to results that couldn't be predicted in advance. As Marcus's first year as Pentagon cybersecurity director concluded, he received intelligence briefings that reinforced the critical importance of Sentinel's capabilities. Foreign adversaries were developing cyber weapons that traditional security systems couldn't detect or counter. The framework he'd created in his studio apartment was becoming central to defending against some of the most sophisticated threats facing national security. Colonel Mitchell briefed Marcus on classified intelligence showing that Sentinel had already prevented 3 major attacks on critical infrastructure: power grids, financial networks, and communication systems that supported essential services. The attacks had been so sophisticated that they would have succeeded against any other defensive framework currently deployed. "Marcus, I want you to understand the scope of what you've accomplished," Colonel Mitchell said during one of their regular strategy meetings. "Sentinel isn't just innovative cybersecurity technology, it's become a strategic asset that's protecting millions of Americans from threats they'll never know existed." The briefing included details about how foreign intelligence services were attempting to recruit cybersecurity experts who might have knowledge of Sentinel's capabilities. Marcus's background was being investigated by hostile actors who wanted to understand how an independent researcher had developed defensive capabilities that exceeded their most advanced defensive tools. The attention was flattering in a way, but it also highlighted the lonely responsibility that came with breakthrough success. Marcus's work was protecting national security, but it was also making him a target for adversaries who wanted to neutralize or co-opt his innovations. His unconventional background, which had once made him seem unemployable, now made him valuable to people with dangerous intentions. Marcus implemented enhanced security protocols for his personal and professional activities, working with Pentagon security specialists to protect not just classified information, but the creative processes that had led to Sentinel's development. The irony wasn't lost on him that success in cybersecurity required becoming paranoid about cybersecurity threats. Elena's accounting career, meanwhile, had stagnated in ways that became more apparent as Marcus's influence expanded. She'd been passed over for a promotion that went to a colleague with less experience but better networking skills. Her technical capabilities were strong, but the accounting profession rewarded different qualities than the innovation and independent thinking that had driven Marcus's success. "Marcus, I've been thinking about making a career change," Elena confided during one of their regular phone calls. "Watching your journey has made me realize that I've been too focused on safe, predictable advancement. I'm wondering if I should take more risks, pursue opportunities that might be less certain, more rewarding."
Marcus encouraged Elena's thinking while also helping her understand the differences between calculated risks and reckless gambles. "Elena, the key isn't taking risks for the sake of taking risks. The key is developing expertise that's valuable enough to justify unconventional approaches. I could take risks with Sentinel because I knew the technology was breakthrough. I had evidence to support my confidence." Elena's career reflection represented a broader shift happening within their family and social network. Marcus's success had demonstrated that unconventional paths could lead to extraordinary outcomes, but it had also highlighted the importance of exceptional capability and persistent effort in making those paths viable. As Marcus approached his second year as Pentagon cybersecurity director, he faced decisions about the long-term direction of his career in research. Sentinel was being implemented successfully across government agencies, but Marcus was already developing ideas for next-generation cybersecurity frameworks that would address emerging threats from artificial intelligence and quantum computing. The new research would require even more unconventional approaches than Sentinel had demanded. Quantum-resistant cryptography that can be implemented on existing hardware? AI systems that can predict attack vectors before they're developed? These capabilities are decades away from practical application. Marcus smiled, remembering similar skepticism about Sentinel's capabilities 3 years earlier. Sir, sophisticated cyber threats are evolving faster than our traditional development timelines can accommodate. We need defensive frameworks that anticipate future attack vectors rather than just responding to current ones. The research I'm proposing will take 5 years, but the threats we're preparing for will emerge within that time frame. The proposal was approved with a budget that exceeded Sentinel's original development costs by an order of magnitude. Marcus would be leading a research team of 30 specialists working on cybersecurity capabilities that wouldn't be deployed until the late 2020s. The timeline and scope represented the kind of long-term strategic thinking that was rare in government technology development. Elena's reaction to Marcus's expanded Pentagon role was a mixture of pride and bewilderment. Marcus, you're now responsible for protecting the country against cyber threats that don't even exist yet. How have you developed confidence in ideas that are so far ahead of current reality? Elena, it's the same process that led to Sentinel, just extended further into the future. I analyze current threat trajectories, identify capabilities that adversaries are likely to develop, and work backward to design defensive frameworks that can counter those capabilities. The key is starting the research before the threats become urgent. Marcus's explanation highlighted how his thinking had evolved from solving immediate cybersecurity problems to anticipating strategic challenges that wouldn't emerge for years. The shift from reactive to predictive cybersecurity research represented a broader thinking that Marcus had developed over his unconventional career path.
Another unconventional approach that challenged traditional government technology development. Dr. Jennifer Walsh, the senior researcher who had initially resisted Marcus's unconventional methods, had become one of his strongest supporters as Sentinel's success became undeniable. She approached Marcus about leading one of the quantum cryptography research teams, acknowledging that her previous concerns about institutional procedures had been misplaced. Marcus, I want to apologize for the resistance I showed to your approaches last year. Dr. Walsh said during a private meeting in Marcus's Pentagon office, I was prioritizing process over innovation, and I realize now that breakthrough cybersecurity research requires exactly the kind of unconventional thinking that I was trying to constrain. Marcus appreciated Dr. Walsh's honesty and offered her the opportunity to lead the quantum cryptography team, recognizing that her institutional knowledge would be valuable for implementing unconventional research within government frameworks. The collaboration represented a synthesis of innovative thinking and procedural expertise that could accelerate the development timeline. The quantum cryptography research team included specialists from multiple agencies and academic institutions, representing the kind of interdisciplinary collaboration that Marcus believed was essential for addressing next-generation cyber threats. The team's charter was to develop encryption methods that would remain secure even against attacks from quantum computers that didn't yet exist. Marcus's leadership style for the expanded research program emphasized the same principles that had guided Sentinel's development: evidence-based decision-making, rapid prototyping, and willingness to abandon approaches that didn't produce results. The Pentagon had given him unprecedented freedom to pursue unconventional research methods, trusting that his track record justified experimental approaches. Elena's career transition accelerated as she watched Marcus's expanded influence in cybersecurity policy and research. She enrolled in evening courses in data analysis and information systems, beginning the technical education that would allow her to understand and potentially contribute to the field that had transformed her brother's life. "Marcus, I'm not trying to copy your career path," Elena explained during one of their weekly conversations, "but I want to understand technology well enough to recognize innovation when I see it. I missed the significance of your work because I didn't have the background to evaluate its potential." Elena's educational journey represented her acknowledgement that technological literacy was becoming essential for professional success across multiple fields. Her accounting expertise remained valuable, but understanding information systems and data security would make her more effective in almost any career context. Marcus encouraged Elena's technical education while also helping her identify ways to apply cybersecurity principles to financial services, where data protection and fraud prevention were becoming increasingly critical. Their conversations evolved from family updates to technical discussions about threat modeling and risk assessment in accounting contexts. The dynamic shift between Marcus and Elena reflected broader changes happening within their extended family and professional networks. Marcus's success had elevated his status not just as a cybersecurity expert, but as someone whose judgment about technology and career development carried significant weight. Dr. Rodriguez's daughter, Sarah, whom Marcus had mentored about cybersecurity career development, was accepted into a prestigious graduate program that combined computer science with national security studies. Her research proposal focused on applying artificial intelligence to threat detection, building on concepts that Marcus had discussed during their mentoring conversations. Sarah's academic success validated Marcus's advice about balancing
conventional credentialing with innovative research interests. She was following a more traditional educational path than Marcus had, but incorporating the kind of unconventional thinking that he demonstrated was essential for breakthrough cybersecurity research. Marcus's influence on the next generation of cybersecurity researchers was becoming one of the most important aspects of his expanded Pentagon role. Graduate students and early career professionals sought his mentorship, hoping to learn from someone who had successfully navigated the transition from independent research to institutional leadership. The mentoring relationships gave Marcus perspective on his own journey from isolated researcher to Pentagon director. Each conversation with aspiring cybersecurity professionals reminded him of the importance of persistence, self-confidence, and willingness to pursue ideas that others might dismiss as impractical. As Marcus's second year in Pentagon leadership progressed, he received an invitation that crystallized how completely his professional reputation had transformed. The National Academy of Sciences was offering him membership in recognition of his contributions to cybersecurity research and national defense. The honor was typically reserved for researchers with decades of peer-reviewed publications and institutional affiliations. Marcus's nomination highlighted the Academy's recognition that cybersecurity innovation was happening outside traditional academic structures and needed to be acknowledged through institutional channels. His membership would represent not just personal achievement, but validation of unconventional approaches to scientific research and development. Elena's reaction to Marcus's National Academy nomination was immediate and wholehearted. "Marcus, this is incredible! You're being recognized by the country's most prestigious scientific institution for work that started in your studio apartment. This proves that breakthrough research can happen anywhere by anyone with sufficient dedication and insight." The nomination process required Marcus to document his research methodology, technical innovations, and contributions to national security in formats that academic institutions could evaluate. The exercise was challenging because Sentinel's development had followed unconventional processes that didn't fit standard scholarly frameworks. Marcus worked with Dr. Amanda Foster, the professor who had initially rejected his papers but was now a strong supporter of his work, to translate his cybersecurity innovations into language and formats that would resonate with National Academy reviewers. The collaboration represented a bridge between unconventional research and institutional recognition. "Marcus, your work represents a paradigm shift in how we think about cybersecurity research and development," Dr. Foster explained as they prepared his nomination materials. "The National Academy needs to recognize that some of the most important scientific innovations are happening outside traditional academic structures and need to be acknowledged through institutional channels." The National Academy membership was confirmed 6 months later, making Marcus one of the youngest people ever admitted to the organization. The recognition validated not just his technical contributions, but the unconventional approach that had made those contributions possible.
Marcus's acceptance speech at the National Academy induction ceremony focused on the importance of supporting innovative research regardless of its institutional context. Scientific breakthrough often requires thinking that challenges established assumptions and methods. We need institutions that can recognize and nurture unconventional approaches while maintaining the rigor and integrity that scientific progress demands. The speech resonated with Academy members who had their own experiences with institutional resistance to innovative ideas. Marcus's journey from rejected job applicant to National Academy member had become a case study.
The relationship between innovation and institutional recognition. Elena attended the induction ceremony, watching her brother receive honors from some of the most distinguished scientists in the country. The transformation from delusional computer fantasies to National Academy membership had taken less than 3 years, but the journey had fundamentally changed both siblings' understanding of success, achievement, and the relationship between conventional wisdom and breakthrough innovation. As the ceremony concluded, Elena reflected on how profoundly Marcus's story had influenced her own career decisions and life philosophy. His willingness to pursue unconventional research despite family skepticism had demonstrated the importance of self-confidence and persistence in achieving extraordinary goals. The lesson extended far beyond cybersecurity to any field where innovation required challenging established assumptions and methods. Marcus's National Academy membership brought with it responsibilities that extended far beyond his Pentagon cybersecurity work. He was appointed to multiple advisory committees, overseeing government science policy, technology development priorities, and research funding allocation. The boy his family had once considered directionless was now helping determine how billions of dollars in federal research funding would be distributed across universities and national laboratories. The irony wasn't lost on Marcus that institutions which had previously rejected his work were now competing for his endorsement of their research proposals. Universities that had dismissed his graduate school applications began reaching out about visiting professorships and collaboration opportunities. The same academic conferences that had rejected his papers 3 years earlier were now inviting him to deliver plenary lectures on the future of cybersecurity research. Dr. Richard Sterling, the department head who had refused Marcus's application for the cybersecurity master's program, sent a carefully worded letter requesting a meeting to discuss mutual research interests and potential collaboration opportunities. The letter made no reference to their previous interaction, instead focusing on how Marcus's groundbreaking contributions to national cybersecurity aligned with the university's strategic research priorities. Marcus chose to take the meeting, partly out of curiosity about how Dr. Sterling would navigate the obvious awkwardness of the situation, but mostly because he was genuinely interested in supporting cybersecurity education improvements that could benefit future students. His own unconventional path had worked, but not everyone had the resources or temperament for independent research in isolation. The meeting took place in Dr. Sterling's office, the same room where Marcus had been told his research interests were too theoretical for practical application, and that he should consider more traditional computer science specializations. Dr. Sterling had clearly prepared for the conversation, researching Marcus's achievements and preparing talking points about institutional collaboration. "Marcus, I want to begin by acknowledging that our department may have missed an opportunity when we didn't accept your application several years ago," Dr. Sterling opened carefully. "We're always learning and refining our evaluation processes, and your subsequent achievements suggest that our assessment criteria might have been too narrow." Marcus appreciated the diplomatic phrasing, but he was more interested in discussing substantive improvements to cybersecurity education than relitigating past decisions. "Dr. Sterling, I think the important question isn't what happened with my application, but how we can structure cybersecurity programs to better support students who are pursuing innovative research approaches." The conversation that followed was productive in ways that surprised both participants.
Dr. Sterling was genuinely committed to improving his department's cybersecurity curriculum.
Marcus had developed specific ideas about educational reform based on his experience with conventional academic limitations. They discussed partnerships that could give students access to real-world cybersecurity challenges while maintaining academic rigor and theoretical foundations. Marcus agreed to guest lecture in Dr. Sterling's advanced cybersecurity courses and to serve on a curriculum development committee focused on incorporating emerging threats and defensive technologies into academic programs. The collaboration represented a bridge between his unconventional research background and traditional academic structures. Elena's technical education had progressed to the point where she could follow the details of Marcus's cybersecurity work and even contribute insights about financial fraud detection that related to his threat modeling research. Their weekly conversations had evolved into genuine technical discussions, where Elena's accounting expertise provided perspectives that pure cybersecurity specialists might miss. Marcus, the patterns you're describing in advanced persistent threats remind me of sophisticated accounting fraud schemes, Elena observed during one of their calls. The attackers use legitimate system functions to hide malicious activities, just like fraudsters use normal business processes to conceal illegal transactions. Elena's insight led Marcus to explore connections between financial fraud detection and cybersecurity threat identification that hadn't been thoroughly investigated in academic literature. The interdisciplinary approach yielded new algorithms for detecting attack behaviors that masqueraded as normal network activity, expanding Sentinel's capabilities in unexpected directions. The collaboration with Elena highlighted how Marcus's success had transformed not just his own career, but the intellectual dynamics within his entire family. Instead of defending his work against skepticism, he was now benefiting from family members who brought different expertise to bear on cybersecurity challenges. Marcus's expanded research team at the Pentagon had grown to include specialists from disciplines beyond traditional cybersecurity. Behavioral psychologists who studied attacker motivation, economists who analyzed the financial incentives driving cybercrime, and even anthropologists who investigated how cultural factors influence security practices in different organizations. The interdisciplinary approach was yielding research insights that purely technical teams had missed. Dr. Sarah Kim, a behavioral economist who joined Marcus's team from the Treasury Department, identified patterns in cryptocurrency transactions that revealed how state-sponsored hacking groups funded their operations. Her analysis led to new capabilities for tracking and disrupting the financial networks that supported advanced cyber threats. Marcus, most cybersecurity research focuses on technical vulnerabilities and defensive technologies, but cyber attacks are ultimately human activities driven by economic and political motivations. Understanding those motivations gives us additional vectors for preventing and responding to attacks. The integration of behavioral and economic analysis into cybersecurity research represented another unconventional approach that challenged traditional boundaries between academic disciplines. Marcus's willingness to incorporate insights from fields outside computer science was generating defensive capabilities that purely technical approaches couldn't achieve. Colonel Mitchell, who had become Marcus's closest collaborator in Pentagon leadership, was promoted to general and given expanded responsibility for coordinating cybersecurity policy across multiple defense agencies. Her advancement reflected the growing recognition that cybersecurity was becoming central to national security strategy rather than a technical support function.
Technical specialists, General Mitchell observed during one of their strategic planning meetings. Today, cyber threats are recognized as one of the primary challenges facing national defense, and your work has been instrumental in driving that transformation. General Mitchell's promotion created opportunities for Marcus to influence cybersecurity policy at the highest levels of government. He was invited to brief congressional committees on emerging threats, participated in National Security Council discussions about cyber warfare doctrine, and consulted with international allies about coordinated responses to state-sponsored attacks. The policy influence represented a dramatic expansion of Marcus's impact beyond technical research and development. Ideas that had originated in his studio apartment were now shaping how the United States approached cybersecurity as a strategic priority rather than just a technical challenge. Marcus's quantum cryptography research team achieved its first major breakthrough 18 months ahead of schedule, developing encryption protocols that could be implemented on existing hardware while providing security against theoretical quantum computer attacks. The advance positioned the United States several years ahead of foreign adversaries in post-quantum cryptography development. Dr. Jennifer Walsh, who had evolved from skeptic to enthusiastic supporter of Marcus's unconventional research methods, led the implementation of the quantum-resistant protocols across government communications networks.
The deployment required coordination between dozens of agencies and thousands of security professionals, representing one of the largest cybersecurity upgrades in government history. Marcus, what we've accomplished with quantum cryptography demonstrates the value of anticipatory research, Dr. Walsh reflected, as the implementation neared completion. By starting development before the threats materialized, we've given ourselves a strategic advantage that wouldn't have been possible with reactive approaches. The quantum cryptography success validated Marcus's philosophy of developing defensive capabilities ahead of emerging threats, rather than responding to attacks after they occurred. The approach required long-term thinking and willingness to invest in research that might not yield immediate applications, but it could provide decisive advantages when implemented successfully. Elena's career transition accelerated as she completed her technical education and began applying cybersecurity principles to financial services consulting. Her unique combination of accounting expertise and security knowledge made her valuable to organizations that needed to protect financial data while maintaining regulatory compliance and operational efficiency. Marcus, I'm starting to understand what you meant about finding the intersection between different fields, Elena said as she prepared to launch her own cybersecurity consulting practice. My accounting background gives me insights into financial fraud that pure cybersecurity specialists might miss, while my security training helps me identify vulnerabilities that traditional accountants wouldn't recognize. Elena's consulting business focused on helping small and medium-sized financial services firms implement cybersecurity measures that were sophisticated enough to prevent serious attacks, but practical enough for organizations without large IT departments. Her success demonstrated how technical expertise could be applied across multiple industries rather than confined to traditional cybersecurity roles. The transformation of Elena's career from traditional accounting to innovative cybersecurity consulting represented a broader shift in how their family approached professional development and risk-taking. Marcus's unconventional success had provided a model for pursuing opportunities that combined established expertise with emerging technologies. Marcus received an invitation from the World Economic Forum to participate in a global cybersecurity
initiative focused on protecting critical infrastructure in developing countries. The opportunity would involve traveling to multiple continents over 6 months, working with international teams to implement cybersecurity frameworks based on Sentinel's architecture. The international assignment represented recognition that Marcus's innovations had implications beyond United States national security. Cyber threats were global phenomena that required coordinated responses across national boundaries, and Marcus's expertise was increasingly viewed as essential for international cybersecurity collaboration. General Mitchell supported Marcus's participation in the international initiative, recognizing that strengthening global cybersecurity capabilities ultimately benefited American interests. Marcus, cyber attacks don't respect national boundaries, and our security depends partly on the defensive capabilities of our allies and trading partners. Your work can help build international resilience against threats that affect everyone. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.